Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. If you were listening to this on the bus to school or maybe, sneaking an earbud in during study hall, and I'm specifically calling out the middle and high schoolers right now, we are looking at the sky today. But we aren't talking about clouds. We are talking about the rule book that governs the sky. Because as of a few months ago, the FAA basically took a red pen to the old rules, shredded them, and wrote something totally new. We are talking about MOSAIC.
Which I have to admit right off the bat is just a terrible acronym. It sounds like we're going to be gluing colorful tiles together in art class.
It really does. It sounds like a craft project. Today, class, we make a coaster. But in our world, the aviation world, it stands for Modernization of Special Airworthiness Certification.
That is a mouthful.
A massive mouthful. But if we strip away all that government speak, the mission of this deep dive is pretty simple. We're looking at how the barrier to becoming a pilot just collapsed. If you've ever looked at flight training and thought, too expensive, too hard, too much paperwork. Well, the sources we have today, the final rule text from July 2025, the EAA breakdown, all the industry analysis, they all say you're operating on outdated information.
Right. This is easily the biggest shakeup in general aviation in 20 years. Maybe longer. It's fundamentally changing the entry point for new pilots.
And because we're recording this in January 2026, we're in this unique spot. The rule came out last summer, but it had a delayed fuse. Phase 1, which changed what pilots are allowed to do, that went live back in October 2025. So this isn't theoretical anymore.
No, this is law of the land right now.
It's not coming soon.
Exactly. And phase 2, which covers the manufacturing side, what companies can actually build, that kicks in this coming July. We'll get to that because there's some wild stuff in there about space vehicles. But I want to start with the people, the pilots, specifically the sport pilot.
Let's break that down. I've always used this analogy that getting into aviation is like a video game. For the last 2 decades, the sport pilot certificate was sort of like the demo version of the game.
That's actually a really solid way to put it.
It was. You got to play, you got into the air, but you had all these restrictions. You couldn't go certain places. You couldn't use the cool items. You were locked out of the best levels. You were stuck in the tutorial area.
The sport pilot track was created back in 2004. The intention was it could make flying cheaper and easier. But to do that, the FAA put these really strict limits on it. You could get your license in half the time, sure, but you were stuck flying incredibly small aircraft, slow aircraft.
You were grounded at night.
Strictly grounded at night. And MOSAIC is basically the massive patch update that just dropped. It fixed the bugs, unlocked the map, and buffed the stats.
It really did. And the biggest bug it fixed was the weight limit. This is the technical crux of the whole change. Before October 2025, if you held a sport pilot certificate, you were legally restricted to flying light sport aircraft, or LSAs.
Right. And the definition of an LSA was so rigid, it could not weigh more than 3,320 pounds.
1,320 pounds. For context, a standard Honda Civic weighs about, 3,000 pounds? So we're talking about a machine that weighs less than half of a compact car.
Exactly. These were often described as featherweights, and while they're fun, they have physics working against them. In the air, mass provides stability. If you're a student pilot learning to land in a 1,300-pound plane and a gust of wind hits you,
You're going to feel it.
you get tossed around. It made the learning curve steeper because you needed perfect weather to train.
I remember talking to instructors who said they had to cancel lessons constantly because the wind was just 5 knots too strong for the LSA. But the patch notes for MOSAIC are fascinating because they didn't just raise the weight limit, they deleted it.
Correct. And this is the insight that matters most. The FAA moved from a prescriptive standard, thou shalt not weigh more than X, to a performance-based standard. They realized that weight doesn't inherently make a plane unsafe. In fact, a heavier plane is often structurally stronger, more stable.
Okay, so what is the new limit? If it's not weight, what stops me from flying a Boeing 747 as a sport pilot? Because that's definitely heavier than 1,320 pounds.
The new limit is the stall speed, specifically a clean stall speed, meaning without flaps deployed of 54 knots or less.
Okay, we need to pause and define that for the listener who hasn't opened a physics textbook in a while. Stall speed.
Why is that the safety metric? So a stall isn't the engine quitting. That's a common misconception. A stall is what happens when the wing can no longer produce enough lift to keep the airplane flying. It stops flying and starts falling. The speed at which that happens is the stall speed. The FAA looked at the data and said if an engine quits or a pilot messes up, the most critical factor for survival is how fast the plane contacts the ground.
Kinetic energy.
Precisely. Kinetic energy increases with the square of the speed. If you can touch down slowly at 54 knots, which is about 62 miles per hour, your chances of walking away from a crash are incredibly high. So the FAA said, we don't care how heavy the plane is as long as it flies slowly enough to be crash-worthy.
That is a huge philosophical shift. It's safety through physics, not arbitrary scales. So practically speaking, since the weight limit is gone, the demo version restrictions are lifted. What can a teenager walking into a flight school today actually fly? Because before, they'd walk past the rows of cool planes, the Cessnas and Pipers, to get to the little lawnmower-sounding thing in the back.
That visual is gone. That is the single biggest practical change of MOSAIC. Before this rule, the Cessna 172, the most produced aircraft in history, the backbone of flight training, it was off limits to sport pilots because it weighed about 2,500 pounds. Too heavy.
Yeah.
And now, it fits perfectly within the performance standards.
So a student can walk in, hop in the exact same standard Cessna 172 that the professional airline pilots train in, but do it under the sport pilot rules.
Yes. And think about the economics of that for a second.
Wow.
Before, flight schools had to buy a separate fleet of specialized light sport aircraft just to cater to sport pilots. Most didn't bother. It was too much capital. Now, their existing fleet is the sport fleet.
Which means availability goes way up, and theoretically costs should stabilize because you aren't paying for niche equipment.
Exactly. And it's not just the Cessna 172. It's the Piper Cherokee, the Warrior. Pretty much any standard four-seat, single-engine piston airplane at a local airport is now unlocked.
You mentioned 4 seats. This was another bug in the old game. The old rule said 2 seats max. If the plane had a back seat, even if it was empty, you couldn't fly it.
Right. Which was right. You're legally barred from flying a plane because it could carry people you aren't carrying.
So now, can I load up my 3 best friends and head to the beach for spring break?
Not quite. And we need to be very clear here so nobody loses their license. MOSAIC expanded the capacity of the plane you can operate, but it kept the occupancy limit. The rule says a sport pilot is limited to 1 passenger.
So I can fly the 4-seat station wagon. I just can't fill the back seats.
You are the pilot, and you can have 1 friend in the co-pilot seat. The back seats have to remain empty of people. You can put your luggage back there, but no humans.
Okay, but wait. In the notes I saw a term, the Gemini method.
Yeah.
It sounds like a NASA program, but it's related to flight training in these 4-seaters.
It's a huge benefit of having those back seats legally available. Under the old rules, if you were training, it was just you and the instructor. But now, because the plane has back seats, a flight school can put 2 students in the plane.
1 flying, 1 watching.
Exactly. 1 student flies the lesson from the front left seat, the other student sits in the back and observes, then they swap. Educational psychology tells us you learn a massive amount just by watching someone else struggle with a maneuver. You aren't stressed about controlling the plane, you're just analyzing.
And you're effectively getting double the airtime for the same block of instruction. That's brilliant.
It makes the training environment so much more collaborative. You have a study buddy in the cockpit with you. It's fantastic for schools.
Let's pivot to the barriers. Because usually when we talk about aviation, the dream dies when people hit 2 walls, the money wall and the medical wall.
And MOSAIC takes a sledgehammer to both, especially for the demographic we're talking about here, the high schooler, the college student, or even the parent who always wanted to fly but felt it was too much hassle.
Let's hit cost first. How much of a difference are we talking?
A traditional private pilot license requires a legal minimum of 40 hours of flight time, but the national average is closer to 60 or 70 hours. At, say, $200 an hour. That adds up fast. The sport pilot certificate requires roughly half the training time. The minimum is 20 hours.
So you're slicing the biggest line item in the budget by 50%.
Roughly, yes. And because you're likely learning in a stable Cessna 172 now, instead of a flighty featherweight, you aren't wasting hours redoing lessons because the wind pushed you around, so the efficiency is higher.
But the medical, this is the one that always surprises people. This is the aha moment.
It is the most unique feature of the sport pilot rules, and MOSAIC kept it and expanded it to these bigger planes. For a standard private pilot license, you have to go to an aviation medical examiner, a specific type of doctor, get a physical, disclose your entire health history. If you have a history of ADHD or anxiety, certain heart conditions, it can be a nightmare of paperwork. It can take months.
I've heard horror stories of people getting grounded for minor things from their childhood medical records.
It happens. But for the Sport Pilot Certificate, the FAA allows you to use your valid U.S. driver's license as proof of medical eligibility.
I love the logic of this. If you are fit enough to drive a 2-ton SUV at 70 miles per hour on the highway, the FAA essentially says you're fit enough to fly a plane in broad daylight.
With caveats. We have to be responsible here. You must comply with your driver's license restrictions, so if you need glasses to drive, you need glasses to fly. And this is the big one. You cannot have been denied an aviation medical in the past. If the FAA has already told you no, you can't use the driver's license loophole.
But for a healthy 17-year-old who just hasn't bothered with the paperwork?
It's a walk-on pass. You
Right.
show your driver's license to your instructor and you go fly. It removes the bureaucratic anxiety completely.
So we've got bigger planes, lower costs, easier paperwork.
Yeah.
But we haven't even touched the cool stuff yet, the future stuff. Because when I think sport pilot, I still picture a propeller, a spinning fan up front.
Yeah. And that's changing too. The old rules were very specific. Reciprocating engines only. That means pistons, cylinders, spark plugs, old school tech. MOSAIC deleted that line.
That's right.
Jets? Theoretically, small turbines, yes, but the real headline is electric and hybrid.
This is where the video game analogy comes back to life.
It really does. By removing the engine restriction, the FAA just opened the door for electric propulsion. But the even bigger tech change, and this is the one that sounds like sci-fi, is a new category called simplified flight controls.
Explain that, because in my head, a cockpit is a terrifying wall of switches, dials, and levers.
Right, and flying historically requires high coordination. Think about a helicopter. You have a stick in one hand for the rotor tilt, a lever in the other for power, and pedals for the tail rotor. And rubbing your tummy, patting your head, and balancing on a unicycle all at once.
A high-skill floor.
Extremely high. But MOSAIC introduces certification for aircraft where the computer handles that stability. You might just have a joystick. You push it forward to go forward, you let go, and the aircraft hovers.
Like a drone.
Very similar to a commercial drone. The rule language actually mentions envelope protection, meaning the computer will not let you stall the aircraft. It will not let you spin it. If you bank too hard, the computer fights back and says, no, that's unsafe.
That fundamentally changes what it means to be a pilot. You aren't wrestling the machine, you're commanding it.
And it lowers the skill floor immensely. For the first time, sport pilots can fly helicopters, or more accurately, vertical lift aircraft, if they have these simplified controls. Before MOSAIC, anything with a rotor was strictly forbidden for sport pilots.
So imagine a high schooler today. By the time they graduate college, there could be electric vertical takeoff air taxis that fly like video games, and their sport pilot license. The one they got with their driver's license makes them legal to fly it.
That is exactly the path the FAA just paved. And instructors can give specific endorsements for those vehicles. You don't need to learn to fly a 1960s Huey to fly a 2028 electric air taxi. You just learn the new system.
I want to circle back to something we skipped over, the concept of endorsements. We talked about how the old game had features locked out, like night flying.
Yes, that was a hard no in the past. If the sun went down, you had to be on the ground.
And now?
Now, you can unlock night mode, but there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
And it's a reasonable one. While you can use your driver's license for day flying, the FAA decided that flying at night brings higher risks. Your vision works differently. Spatial disorientation is a real killer. So if you want to fly at night as a sport pilot, you cannot use just your driver's license.
You need the real medical.
You need a third-class medical certificate, or basic med. Plus, you need specific night flight training and a sign-off from an instructor.
I actually like that. It's a modular license. You start with the basics, daytime, simple flying. If you want the pro features, you have to prove you're fit for them.
Exactly. It's like downloadable content for your license. You download the night pack. You can also download the retractable gear pack.
Wait, retractable gear? Like the wheels fold up? That was banned before, too.
It was. Sport pilots were stuck with fixed wheels hanging down in the wind, creating drag. Now, if you want to fly a sleek, retractable gear plane, you just get some training, get an endorsement in your logbook, and you're legal. You don't have to upgrade your whole license to private pilot. You just add the skill you want.
And speed. We almost forgot speed. The old limit was 120 knots. What is it now?
250 knots.
250 knots. It's nearly 300 miles per hour.
It's incredibly fast. There basically isn't a piston single-engine plane on the market that goes faster than that. They essentially took the speed governor off.
So zooming out,
Yeah.
why did the FAA do this? I mean, I'm cynical. Usually government regulations don't just say, hey, go have more fun, here are fewer rules.
Well, it's grounded in data. They call it the safety continuum.
Sounds like a Star Trek episode.
It does, but the logic is sound. The FAA looked at the numbers and realized that factory-built aircraft like the Cessna 172 are incredibly safe. But because the old sport pilot rules were so restrictive, people were ignoring them. They were building their own experimental planes in their garages just to get around the speed and weight limits.
And I'm guessing a plane built in a garage by an amateur has a different safety profile than a Cessna built on an assembly line.
Statistically, yes.
Right.
Experimental aircraft have a higher accident rate. So the FAA said, we want to entice people back into the certified factory-built world. By allowing sport pilots to fly these heavier, safer standard aircraft, they are actually improving safety.
It's safety through freedom. By making the rules less annoying, people are more likely to follow them.
Precisely.
Now, we need to clarify one timeline detail.
Yeah.
We've been talking mostly about Phase 1, what the pilots can do today, right now, in January 2026. But Phase 2 is coming up this summer, July 24, 2026, to be exact. What happens then?
Phase 2 is the manufacturing side. That's when the strict definition of light sport aircraft disappears from the regulations entirely for the builders.
So right now, we pilots can fly the old Cessnas. But starting summer 2026, companies can start selling new stuff.
Exactly. This is what unlocks the engineers. Starting in July 2026, companies can certify brand new designs. The four-seaters, the electric turbines, the simplified control aircraft specifically as light sport.
And I saw one nugget in the deep dive notes about space support. Please tell me we're going to space.
Not quite yet, but the rule includes provisions for space support vehicle flights. It creates a legal path for experimental aircraft that are helping develop commercial spaceflight training. It just shows that the FAA isn't just looking at 1970s Cessnas. They are trying to write rules that will work for the next 50 years of aerospace.
So let's wrap this up for our listener. If you are 16 years old, sitting in math class right now, daydreaming about the window, what does MOSAIC mean for you, effectively?
It means the door is wider open than it has ever been. You can go to your local airport this weekend. You can start training in a standard plane, a Cessna or Piper, that allows you to actually learn, not just fight the wind. You don't need to worry about an expensive medical exam right away. Your driver's permit gets you in the air. And you can get licensed in half the time of a private pilot.
And you aren't investing in a dead-end license. You're stepping into an ecosystem that is ready for electric flight, automation, and whatever comes next.
You are future-proofing your skills. The sport pilot isn't the junior pilot anymore. It's the modern pilot.
So here is a thought to leave you with. We've been promised flying cars since the Jetsons. We always joked about it, where's my flying car? But when you look at MOSAIC allowing simplified flight controls, electric engines, and removing the heavy regulatory burden, are we finally looking at the regulatory framework that actually makes the flying car possible? Not for test pilots, but for the next generation of drivers.
The technology was getting there, but the laws were in the way. The laws just moved. Now it's just up to the engineers.
Exciting stuff. Thanks for diving with us. We'll see you on the next one.